All right, so I'll start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Abhishek Jain, and I'm pleased to invite you all to Plant's session on pursuing a BCL from the University of Oxford. Towards the end of this session, we will also be having a Q&A session for which I would request you all to put your questions in the live chat box. Today, we're very fortunate to have with us Shriya Maini, a graduate of the 2013 batch of GNLU. She was awarded the prestigious Dr. Ms. Amriti Salve Scholarship in 2014. She then went on to pursue her BCL from the University of Oxford. She is currently an advocate on record at the Supreme Court of India. She is also a visiting faculty at National Law University, Delhi, and an adjunct faculty at Lloyd Law College, Noida. In this session, Shriya will be speaking in detail on the application process for the BCL, as well as the opportunities available after completing the BCL from the University of Oxford. I would now like to hand it over to Shriya to begin the session.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. That was quite an exhaustive introduction, and a very good morning, good evening, whenever you're watching this session, to everyone who's actually logged in, and also for those who are going to view it much later. I think it's a fantastic initiative that we've come out with this particular aspect with the organization calling me and asking me to share my thoughts on what I feel would be a fantastic way to go about the procedure of making an application for the BCL, because the BCL, as it's called, the Bachelor of Civil Laws, is actually a master's degree. So it's one of the specialized postgraduate courses, which is one of the most prestigious courses even in London as I speak. So it is one of the most coveted courses, and there's a very cutthroat competition when it comes to the application process especially. So what is an aftermath of the BCL is much easier, but I think the road to BCL is actually the toughest part. So when you look at the degree as such, it's one of the practice-oriented degrees, if I may say so with permission, that it is one of the degrees wherein a dispute resolution practice, whether it's on the civil, criminal, or the corporate law side, is actually taken into consideration. And you have a lot of Queen's Councils, you have a lot of visiting faculties coming to teach at the BCL course from the courts of law in United Kingdom. So it is definitely one of those courses which is very practice oriented in that sense. So if anyone's looking at a litigation perspective, if anyone's looking at a good disputes practice, also this beneficial aspect of the degree could help you manifolds. So actually, before I start with telling you about the BCL at length, I think what's essential is to look at it from a few different lenses, which I think the team has put together beautifully. So I think one of the first things that is often asked and that I'm often questioned about is essentially that who can apply for the BCL? So I think one of the most important things to understand is that once you complete the bachelor's degree, a master's in law is essentially a specialization. Now, having said that it's a specialization, it could either be a subject specialization or it could also be a general LLM. So this is a call you as a student have to make, a student of law. And you have to decide whether you want to keep all doors open, you want to go in for a generic LLM degree, which is where actually the BCL falls. And it is once that choice is made, then you decide whether you want to apply for, say, a Magister Juris or a BCL. I'll explain what these terms are. So basically, all the civil law countries and the common law countries, uniformly, students apply from all across the globe when it comes to an Oxford degree. And I think this makes it incumbent on us to understand that essentially the two laws are different. So you have a decree-based law when you're talking about the civil law, of course, and when you're talking about the common law, you're talking about a more precedent, judgment-based law. So essentially the approach is different, which is why what happens is that they have termed the two degrees as separate. So whenever you're applying to the University of Oxford, if you're coming from a country like, say, for instance, the United States, wherein you're following a decree-based law, you have a civil law perspective, you will apply for, say, a Magister Juris, which is basically the concomitant equivalent degree to a BCL, a Bachelor in Civil Law, which is the canon name, which has actually been retain, the canon law name. So these are essential two aspects of understanding what a generic LLM is. And by general, I mean you're thrown up in a pool of about, say, 40 subjects, and you have to pick up any four. Now, these four could range from anything as diverse and broad spectrumed as probably an international commercial arbitration, to an international criminal law at the other end, to a commercial remedies, to a modern laws of armed conflicts. So you can pretty much have a bag full of four subjects that you have to pick. And that's why the general LLM is actually a very, very interesting space to be in, because you can actually pick up a random range of subjects and study everything that you actually wanted to across a range of diverse subjects, whether it's corporate, civil, criminal. So that's one aspect of a general LLM. The second aspect, of course, is the fact that it keeps all your doors open, like I said. So you have that perspective that when you come back to India, perhaps, or if you're looking at a training contract outside after you pursue the BCL, you can most definitely open those avenues as well. So I will also discuss with you the kind of opportunities which opened up for me personally once I go down to this discussion further with you. But I think this is at breadth, first breath that I can tell you about a general LLM. On the other hand is what we call a specialized LLM. This is comparatively easier, I feel, because here I think as students of law, we have a fair idea of what we want to specialize in. So which subject really we want to specialize in? Perhaps it could be international commercial arbitrations. It could be, so for instance, you could go to a Geneva, you could go to MIDS there, you could go to, if you want to do an international criminal law specialization, you could probably be looking at Leiden University. And specifically, if I look at BCL from the University of Oxford, it's more on the generic LLM side that I would actually look at it. Okay, so it's slightly more towards that aspect of the BCL degree per se in its nature, as it's been put out on the table, that we invite students from all over the globe. Now, the second most important thing when we talk about a BCL degree is essentially when to apply. So now this becomes a very interesting question, because I'm often asked this question that when do you think it's the best time to apply? So my perspective of having this answer pre-COVID scenario was that you must work for a year, you must gather some work experience, and only after then should you step a foot probably to do a master's or a specialization degree. But I think after COVID has struck, I really feel that the number of degrees you can amass during this period is what you should make use of the most. So I think as students of law, if we can do quickly, very, very quickly, a specialized degree now, it could benefit us manifolds, because I'm not sure if there's much work available in the markets right now in terms of gathering work experience, apart from, say, a PPO that someone is offered, or if you have a campus placement, etc. So I think this is a fantastic time to actually pursue all your opportunities when it comes to applying for a BCL degree from the University of Oxford, for sure. Okay, so this is something that I feel any student of law who's done his or her bachelor's is eligible per se for the BCL degree. Make an application. It's an exhaustive procedure. In a few seconds, we're going to discuss about the application process. And I think that'll give you a lot more clarity about whether this degree and this course is what you're cut out for or not. So I think the third thing which often comes to my mind is that how do you actually make the application? We've discussed about when to apply, who can apply, but I think what's actually crucial to understanding about a bachelor's in civil law degree from the University of Oxford is the application process. Now, prior to jumping at length into the procedural nuances as such, I just want to entail this for you that bachelor's of civil law has nothing to do with civil law as such. Like I said, it's just the canon law name. Okay, so it is a degree where you can study corporate law, criminal law, and it's as coveted, okay, equally or perhaps even more. So anything that's got to do with a disputes resolution practice is what the BCL degree talks about essentially, right? So when we talk about the application process, let me walk you through as we actually make the application. So pretty much as simple as any other LLM application in its procedural aspect of making the application technologically, but very, very complex, and one of the most tricky applications from the nuance of how a vetting is actually done on the table once the application reaches the checkers. Okay, so it's one of the toughest and it's one of the most tricky applications to actually get through. And I'll tell you why I say this. It's for three reasons, basically. First of all, it's very interesting to note that the Oxford BCL application actually requires 3 recommendations instead of 2. So what you essentially require is you need 3 referees to write your recommendations. So this becomes very, very interesting because you would eventually have someone from your subject specialization, a subject that you intend to take up at the university, should you actually get through the application process in the BCL degree. And that university referral could actually be very, very crucial in making or marring your case as such, if I may say so. So it becomes very interesting that you need 3 references, preferably academic ones. I would say if you've had some professional work experience, take an employment reference. But I think I would stick to, because it's a research process, it's a research degree essentially. It's a degree which encourages you to research in law, to undertake research in the realm of laws. So I think I would definitely stick to academic references. So this is, of course, 3 references, like I said. And 1 or 2 should be from your subject specifications that you feel you're going to specialize in, or those subjects that you feel that you're going to study should you get through the BCL touchwood. So definitely those recommendations are crucial. Number 2, why I say that the Oxford application process is slightly tricky. It's got a very interesting section on scholarships. Now, this is a section which is crucial because there's an early bird application. So if you're applying for the scholarships procedure, then you have a certain deadline which you meet much earlier. Now, this is interesting to note because these are very achievable scholarships. So as you may have read, and I was very happy that the organization plant team reached out to me because of the Salve tag. And I think this is one of the most interesting scholarships because it funds everything right till the T. It funds your airfare, it funds your travel expenses, even within London to travel if you have any employment opportunity, etc. Once you finish the BCL, of course, your living expenses are taken care of, and of course, your tuition fee. So it's almost like an over-encompassing scholarship of about, say, some 40 odd lakh rupees. This is that time when I was probably in 2015. This is 14, 15. So I think it's a lot of money which is put on a platter, and it is, of course, it's tax-free money. It is money which is given for your educational purposes, and it's a very, very useful scholarship, a brilliant opportunity wherein one Indian student every year gets to study the BCL for free. It's literally for free. So it's an excellent opportunity to use. Now, that is why it's one of the most tricky applications, because we don't make a separate application for Salve Scholarship or any other scholarship internal linked to the degree as such at the University of Oxford. So that's why your application itself is taken also as your request for scholarship. So you have to make the application almost flawless, hence being the most tricky one, I would say. Number 3, the reason why I say it's also tricky is very, very interestingly, because it is one of those early applications which includes a diverse range of questions. So you have the American applications much earlier. So US colleges have a deadline of somewhere around August and September. After that, there's a lull period. And I think around October, November, Cambridge kicks in. That's the first deadline you have to meet. And after that, about December end, January first week is when you'll see Oxford requiring you to actually submit your BCL applications. So I think this is interesting to watch out for, because by this time, you would have actually submitted 2 to 3 applications, I'm hoping, or 1. So I had applied for Oxford and Cambridge only. I was very clear I didn't want to go to an American law school because of the distance, because of the civil law and common law differences, etc. So I was very vehement that it was London for me. So I think this is the time when I was already done with Cambridge. I had a fair idea of what I had to write in my application, and I now had to pick and choose. So it is one of those applications which must be tailor-made. So this is why it also becomes even more crucial when it comes to an Oxford application. So the process has to be tailor-made, because the checkpoint when your application is actually being vetted, it's actually being checked for eligibility once it reaches the board. At that point in time, they're really going to check if it's just a generic application or there is a method to the madness. There is some sort of tailor-made tweaking that you've done to a general LLM application. And trust me, they know this. They receive about 50 applications a day. They are very well aware, and it's the creme de la creme which actually gets through the BCL application process. So they very well know this. So now what I'm going to do is, through the application process, I'll tell you certain tricks. Okay. Now there's no technical method. I cannot say that this is actually the successful formula of an application which will definitely get you through the BCL, but I can definitely give you some hints which I feel could help you. Firstly, I think it's very, very important to have a story. This is one of the most important, essential, sentimental factors that you can play on when it comes to a generic board reading your application. Okay, so I would say in your statement of purpose, which is very, very crucial to an Oxford BCL application, in your statement of purpose, have a body in which you have a story. So you will have a little introduction where you will say who you are, where you come from, the country, the university that you're looking at. So if you're looking at Oxford University, you're going to say why you need the BCL. You also have to justify why you don't have that particular course within your country. So that is something that the application will not separately ask you. But that's a question you must answer within the body of the SOP itself. So if you, for instance, for someone like me, I remember at that point in time, we had the Telangana issue going on. So my entire SOP was based upon how I could use EU consti law, comparative consti laws, to actually come out and actually have a solution for the Telangana issue. So I had that quasi-federal unitary nature playing in about how the European Union nations could actually be unified. And we could also have a mutatis mutandis concept here, a pari passu concept in India here, and utilize comparative consti laws. So this was something that I took up. So this is one aspect of looking at things, right? So this is an SOP, a statement of purpose that you can essentially look at. This is one important bit when it comes to an Oxford application. I think the next important thing is recommendations. So recommendations, like I said, are 3 recommendations, preferably academic recommendations. Stay away from employment-based recommendations. If push comes to shove, go for it. There's no other option. Take it. There's no difficulty in that, but stick to academic ones. The recommendation per se must talk about your research skills. It must mention that you have undertaken some sort of a research skill, because this is a research degree. It'll ask you to essentially critique the law. It'll ask you to challenge the existing laws. So I would say definitely go in for some sort of a recommendation from a referee, an academic reference, which details about what kind of research projects you've done over the years, what are your subject area interests, where you've excelled, the kind of marks you've scored. If you're someone who has scored, say, for instance, a CGPA of 6.8 on 7, play to your strengths. So the SOP is an excellent column where you sell yourself in the most subtle way possible, but you play to your strengths. You definitely mention your academic prowess there, because you may not get an opportunity to actually have a face-to-face interview anymore. So this is your one-shot go at impressing the man sitting at the board, who will be able to call you for an interview should there be one, or probably filter your application through if this were to be the litmus test. I think another very important aspect when I would apply to the University of Oxford would be I would go to the website and I would actually look at the options of the courses available. So if I have about 40, 50 odd courses, I would actually zero down on 6 to 8 subjects that I intend to study. And because I can only study 4 in a year, I would definitely pick the subjects to my strength with a balance. Now, what do I mean by this? This is a very common question which can be asked, in the sense that they can ask you that which are the 4 subjects that you intend to actually study once you reach Oxford. So have an answer for this. This is also a very favorite question when it comes to a scholarship interview linked to the University of Oxford for the BCL degree. So why Oxford? Have an answer for it. Why Oxford University BCL degree specifically? Have an answer for it. And thirdly, which subjects? So the answers, most obvious ones, I can give you some leads. You could probably say that this particular subject is not taught in India. For instance, I was harping on international criminal law, and that subject wasn't taught in India back then. In fact, when I came back, I made a lot of money out of it because NLU Delhi was very kind to invite me, because I'd worked with the Mechanism for International Criminal Tribunals at The Hague, and I'd worked with Judge Meron. And I think when I came back, international criminal law actually was one of the things I started teaching. And at NLU Delhi, I think I taught that subject literally. I've been teaching it over 3 years now. So very, very interesting things happened on the way when I didn't actually have a normative stuck plan as such. So I think go with the flow with the application process, but have some sort of an opinion as to which subjects you want to read, okay? Another very common answer when they say is why this particular degree, I would say go to the website, sift through the pages of the website. Sometimes there are certain professors whose books you've read, okay? Gary Bourne, he's a visiting faculty there. Perhaps if you're looking at Adrian Briggs, if you're looking at someone who is coming and teaching private international law, conflict of laws, again, a subject which is not taught in India. So these are aspects that you now need to look at. Perhaps if you're looking at e-contracts, then private international law is a big thing tomorrow, conflict of laws. It's not something that's taught in Indian universities as a specialization. And cash on it. So I think these are very, very interesting aspects that you can now post-COVID also be exposed to. And post-COVID, the globe is one. So you would actually have a common inflow of information and outflow of information, which would make the world very, very interesting a space from a legal perspective to be in. Okay, so this is one aspect that I would look at. So in the application process, I would not worry too much, but I would download the application form in advance. I would keep care of the timelines. There's an early bird application, like I said, for scholarship linked applications. No specific applications separately for scholarships for the BCL, but most definitely, yes. Click on every icon which says, are you interested in the scholarship? Yes. So be aware, there will be a column for college linked or university linked scholarships. So there are two kinds of scholarships. I'll just take a minute to digress here. There are two kinds of scholarships. One is a university linked or a college linked scholarship. For instance, Salve Scholarship, because Mr. Harish Salve, senior advocate, is a next friend of the Exeter College at the University of Oxford. He funds this particular scholarship. So it's essentially an Exeter College linked or the University of Oxford linked scholarship. So this is an internal scholarship in a way. This is how we in the corridors talk about it. So this is an internal scholarship. On the other hand, we have certain foreign donors. For instance, if you may have a Rhodes Scholarship, you may have a Chevening, you may have a Commonwealth, you may have all these other scholarships, INLACs, Aga Khan. These are all external scholarships. You have foreign donors who are coming and who are giving scholarships to the children to study or interest-free loans, Narottam Seskaria loan, for instance. So these are multiple scholarships. So you need to keep aware of these. If you're looking at an external scholarship, that deadline comes much later. It's got nothing to do with your application process until and unless you're in the zone of Rhodes or Commonwealth or a Chevening. That's different. That is a pre-application scholarship. That's got nothing to do with the scholarship form for the application process of BCL as such. Okay, you only need to watch out for your BCL linked scholarships, and for that you'll have to do a little research, perhaps a little R&D on the websites. Okay, so Google it. You'll find ample information. Having said this, one very important caveat: there is something called bursaries. Okay, so a lot of colleges have bursaries. So sometimes people are on a Commonwealth, they're not able to fund their entire education. So they say, okay, we're asking for a bursary. So you could be asked to select your college. So in the application process, also go down to seeing which is a good college, because this is like the Delhi University, the University of Oxford, and you have different colleges. So have an opinion on which college do you want to go to, and how will you decide which college do you want to go to? Go down to the college website. For instance, Exeter College has a lot of scholarships for Indian students. It's one of the favorite for Indian students. So have an opinion on this, okay? Interesting aspect, but I just wanted to tell you. So this is one thing about the application process. So my experience was quite simple with the application process. It was a tough, tricky application as such to make in terms of the competition and the content, but I think the process is very straightforward. Read the FAQs, read the questions and answer carefully. Very, very straightforward. Have your SOP ready. Why the University of Oxford is a pet question. Why this particular course, again, a very pet question. So these are certain staple questions that you can download the form and keep. Have an SOP ready. Have 3 recommendations in PDF format ready. Also now they're asking the professors to directly write to the university with the link that even comes from Harvard, or it comes from the BCL course, etc. So that's very easy. Have your referees informed of those particular aspects, right? Okay, now another very interesting aspect that I was asked to actually cater to when it comes to this particular session was also about what are the skills that we acquire post a BCL degree. Now, this is a very interesting aspect to look at, because I think during the BCL process, the objective is to enjoy the degree. The objective is to have a holistic development. I don't know how post-COVID it's going to pan out, because right now you just have online classes. And as such, the semester has been suspended, but we're having online classes. But the benefit is that the kind of degree that BCL is, it forces you to think. What do I mean by this? it develops a critique thinking when it comes to the kind of examinations, the kind of study materials we are exposed to. Let me give you an example. So I think in India, unfortunately, and I think I started this trend with NLU Delhi itself when I came back, there is something called position papers, which a lot of Indian students, at least I wasn't exposed to. I remember I hadn't even written one in GNLU, I think. And I think when I went to the University of Oxford for the first 1 month, I think I was very happy culturally because I was exposed to so many different cultures. I made so many different friends. But I think from a legal perspective, from theory aspect, from a scholarly aspect, I felt that there was something amiss in my understanding, my comprehension, and my application of the law. And I'll tell you why I say this. I say this because I was used to knowing the law, but I wasn't used to actually curating the law. But I think that's where my perspective really changed. So we had this very interesting way of examination called tutorials, okay? And almost every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we used to have a topic in almost every subject, and we used to have tutes. So we used to get 2, 3 topics, and we had to pick one and take a position on it, and then write our views on it. Now, this was crucial to my understanding of the law now, because I'll tell you why. I always thought that this is how the law was, that we had to mug up the law, we had to understand the law, and then we had to go and reproduce it in the examination hall. But that's not how tutorials function abroad. On the contrary, the law as it exists today, you have to justify why it should change or why it shouldn't change. And I was actually very happy because when I came back from the University of Oxford to NLU Delhi, and I was teaching there, probably a seminar course on international crimes, I was very happy because there was a particular approach which changed over the years that I saw with the students answering the questions. So now if I say that the definition of genocide as per the Genocide Convention or the Rome Statute is something that needs an overhaul, students actually started to have an opinion on it as to why it needs to change or why it shouldn't change. And that's exactly what the law ought to do. We need to amend the law. We need to come out with newer laws. So I think this is how the BCL inculcates the aspect of critiquing skills in you, which could benefit you manifolds, because that's exactly what you need to do once you get to practice. You need to draft written statements, counter affidavits, appeals. You need to challenge what is actually a judicial opinion that has been formed. On the appellate side, it's a very useful practice. And on the original side also, it's a very useful practice because you have to make a file out of a single sheet. So the BCL degree essentially prepares you for a very, very tough session of practice that you might have ahead once you actually come back to a country like India and choose to go to the court corridors. It's also very useful from a commercial aspect, from a commercial litigation aspect. It's also very useful from a corporate law aspect because you learn so much. In case you're doing mergers and acquisitions, you actually have such subjects there. You're probably in a cap marks team. This could benefit you manifolds, probably in a project finance team, because the kind of understanding that you have of other countries' laws and how those probably can look at maneuvering of the law is fantastic. It's a space that's unmatchable almost. Right. Okay, so I think this is one look at how your views towards the law or understanding of the law changes, or rather metamorphosizes, I would say so. But I think the other opportunity that was a huge benefit for me was that I think I was exposed to a lot of career fairs. I was exposed to, of course, my next project, my next legal project, which actually took birth at the University of Oxford. Every Sunday, there was Judge Meron, who is now retired, but he was the then sitting judge, president judge of the Mechanism for International Criminal Tribunals. Prior to that, the ICTY, and then the MICT, of course. And he used to fly down from The Hague to London. He would take a flight and he would come every Sunday morning to teach us. And I fell in love with international criminal law there. And I think after a year, Judge Meron said that, why don't you come and work with me? So before I knew it, my bags were packed and I was at The Hague, 6 months cut down there. And I was working at the tribunal with him. And it was a fantastic opportunity because I was looking at a war crimes tribunal. I was looking at refugee claims. I was looking at leave to remain permissions. I now teach immigration laws. I practice immigration law. But I think that was the closest when I was to how prime ministers and presidents of countries which were actually fighting the Balkan wars in the 1990s were prosecuted. So a fantastic space, very, very different, but nothing that I had thought probably when I was studying international commercial arbitration alongside international crimes. So you see how BCL as a general LLM kept all my doors open. And after The Hague, I came back. I teach international crime now. And on the other hand, I practice international commercial arbitration. I practice commercial remedies. Okay, as a commercial litigator, that's exactly what I practice: injunctions, stays, etc. So very, very interesting aspects can actually emerge, and the kinds of skills, the kinds of opportunities as an aftermath of the BCL could be fantastic to view in hindsight, I would say. Right. So I think this was my take from what I feel about my experience at the University of Oxford. And I think this is exactly how I would wrap up: that go with the flow, keep your mind open. It's an excellent degree to go for. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I think I can't replicate the experience I had at Oxford. I just have good things, and perhaps better whenever I very nostalgically think about my time at Oxford. I was working part-time, so I also used to work as a waitress in the evenings just to support myself for any kind of other living expenses, for travel, or if I wanted to probably attend one of the college balls. So this was an interesting aspect of my journey when it comes to the University of Oxford. And I think it's an experience which almost all of you should undertake. I think an LLM, a lot of people criticize for the fact that, the kind of money is pumped in, etc. But I think it's an experience which is unmatchable. The kind of confidence it gives you, the kind of opportunities that lay out after that. You have to, of course, you have to work very, very hard to shine, because you have so many other people who are equally, if not more good than you. But I think this is an opportunity which must not be missed, and you must try your hardest to get a scholarship. And I think these are the two things that I would want to sort of leave you with when it comes to understanding and applying for the BCL degree at the University of Oxford. Yes.
I think that was a very, very informative session, man. Thank you so much for that, man. But since you mentioned scholarships, I did want to ask you if you could elaborate a little bit about the Salve Scholarship and how and when you applied for it, and how these kinds of applications actually work out.
Okay, so Abhishek, what happens is, specifically for the Salve Scholarship, it is essentially one Indian student a year. And this is a specific scholarship when it comes to the BCL degree. It is, like I said, being a next friend of the Exeter College. He funds one student every year, right from the A to Z. He will fund everything from your tuition fee to your living expense, to your travel expense, to your FM. So I think what's essential is that you understand that the kind of application process also is that tedious. And when I say that, I mean that the application process to get through the BCL degree as such is what is tedious. So Salve doesn't require you to submit a separate application process for him, but there is a column. So when you'll actually be applying for the BCL application as such, electronically online, there will be an icon which will say, are you eligible for the Salve Scholarship? You have to say yes. And then they will ask you that would you want to be entitled, if you're entitled to the Salve Scholarship, would you want to benefit from the Salve Scholarship? So this is asked almost twice, because a lot of people do not take the benefit of Salve also. Okay, there are a lot of people who feel that they already have a Chevening or they already have a Rhodes Scholarship, etc. So they would not take the benefit of Salve even if they're applying to Exeter College. Secondly, very important, you have to select your college as Exeter. You cannot have any other college. So this is one very, very careful aspect. If you're making a BCL degree application and you want to find your eligibility for Salve, you have to select Exeter, because that's the college linked scholarship that it is. Okay. So we have a place there called Exeter House, where all of our scholars stay. And it's a very prestigious place. And it's just like the Rhodes House. So you must select your college as Exeter House. That's the second thing. The third thing is, in your SOP, you have to raise a need for funds factor. So you have to, because you don't have a separate application form. So this question is actually very, very sensible, because you don't have a separate application form for Salve. So where do you actually ask for the money? Where do you seek the funding? So you write a last para within your statement of purpose, when you're applying for the BCL, and it must speak about a need for funds factor. It must state that you're coming from perhaps not very, very convenient backgrounds, and you do require the funding, and you may not be able to take up the degree, even if you were eligible and entitled, until and unless the scholarship were to be afforded or rather accorded to you. So this is something that you cannot afford independently. And it's absolutely fine to write that in so many words. It's absolutely okay. We all have done that. We've raised a need for funds factor. Okay, having said this, this is something I'm telling you off the record for all of you. Have a backup loan ready. Okay, so I was in this situation where my Salve had not come through, and I still wanted to go because getting through the BCL degree in itself is very, very prestigious. So I had actually applied for my education loan, and I was really lucky because I think 2 or 3 weeks from Salve. So Salve's confirmation can come much later. So don't stall your application process and your process to go if you have the kind of funds. Okay. Obviously, do not stress anyone, but if you have the kind of funding available, please by all means go for it. Abhishek.
Yep, I think that clarifies that a lot. So thanks for that. I think my next question is actually with respect to the application process. So there is a requirement for a CV or a resume that has to obviously be submitted. So what exactly do you think is a good CV when you're applying for a BCL? And also if you think that there are certain extra additional requirements that apply when you're also trying to look for a scholarship?
Okay, so that's a very good question as well. I think there is a mock CV that's available, first of all, on the website. Go through that mock CV. If you don't have a CV, I will try and give it to you, your organization. So my current CV is actually modeled. If you see the CV that I sent to NLU Delhi is actually the Oxford CV. Okay, so there is usually a tagline at the top. You have a little introduction about who you are. And then there are bullets about your educational qualifications, about, of course, the fact that what kind of professional qualifications you've undertaken. There are no sentences in an Oxford resume or CV, okay? No sentences, they are just bullets. So you have these particular sections with bullets, and then, of course, your moot court achievements, etc. So I think one of the most important things for an Oxford CV or a resume is look at a sample draft. Now, a sample draft is freely available on the website. I will also circulate my CV to you. You can have a look at that. And apart from the sample draft, I think the second point that I can give you is stick to bullets, no sentences. So suppose you say educational qualification. So you have to say BA, LLB honors dash rank 1 in 70 or rank 1 in 120. This is it. This is your educational qualification. If you've gotten certain medals, then say SV Raju medal or whatever, anything that you want to say for criminal law, for corporate law, whatever. So very, very crisp, very, very basic, just keywords in itself, no full sentences, nothing, just bullets. Okay, so that's a second lead which I can give you for an Oxford CV. I think the third would be stick maximum to a page and a half or two, not longer than that. Also, very, very important, I forgot to tell you this, Oxford SOP has to be not more than 2 pages. Do not exceed more than 2.5 at the max. Cambridge can be a bit lengthy. LSC can be very lengthy, but for Oxford BCL especially, they do not read more than 2 pages. So stick to the 2-page limit very, very carefully, as I say, okay? And have a story in there, have an emotional story, okay? Play on your strengths, say why you're emotionally connected to actually wanting to do a BCL degree, okay? So yeah, these are, I think, certain leads that I can give you. Please also don't mention too much about your extracurricular achievements in terms of which are random. Okay, if you have a painting degree, etc., that could just come as an interest bullet right at the end. But don't go on writing about certificates, etc. I think you should focus just on internships. Be very, very focused on the, of course, very, very important if you have certain research skills. So I would say definitely if you're an editor with some journal, etc., that could be really, really helpful. If you have a book publication or a chapter publication, that's something you can highlight in a CV. That's also something that you can highlight in your SOP. So these are important leads, but I think you shouldn't fret too much about it. I think a CV sample should do fine. Abhishek.
Thank you. I think that honestly is very, very helpful because at least for me, that's changed my outlook to CVs, especially the whole point of putting everything in just phrases and not complete sentences. So that was very useful. I think I am at the end of my questions. I do have a follow-up to the CV question, which So when exactly should an individual decide that, okay, I'm considering that I would probably want to apply for a BCL, and also how exactly could they, try to make their CV go into line with their whole idea of pursuing a BCL?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valid question. I think probably 3 years down in law school, and you would have a fair idea, or you should have a fair idea that, probably this is what I want to do in terms of at least wanting to study more or work. Okay. So, usually by the fourth year, most of us are aware, some of us aren't, and that's absolutely fine if you aren't as well. But I think most of us know that whether we're probably wanting to litigate, we want to probably take up some NGO work, or we want to go and practice in a law firm, or we're looking at a study ahead, we're looking at some sort of master's degree, etc. So I think that's one thing. If you feel that during your law school tenure itself, you can tweak your CV, I would say have a focused approach. I would say pick an area of law. Don't be scattered. So if you feel that criminal law is your focal area, or corporate law is your focal area, or mergers is your focal area, or insolvency practice, you have the IBC code that came up in 2016. If you feel that that's something you are very, very keen and passionate about, then stick to that only. Then have certain publications, do some conferences in that area. So try and make the CV a bit niche. Show some sort of a subject specification, because that will help you manifolds. It shows focus, it shows dedication, and it shows consistency, which is exactly what a CV is supposed to do, apart from the good marks and scores that it carries for sure. So I think these are certain things you can work on, and that's the way you actually build your CV. So I would say get a few conferences in that particular subject, get a few publications in that subject specific area, shove up a few of those particular aspects, and I think that should help your CV. I think the first part of your question was, when do you think we must get to doing the BCL? I think this is a very subjective question. It's difficult to actually pinpoint an answer, because a lot of people feel that they must finish their education once and for all and then get to practice. I was completely of a different thought, because I think I got the scholarship for Salve primarily because of the fact that I was working for a year with Amarchand Mangaldas. So I think that was one of the factors that I had a very different take, because I had seen the law being applied. So I think that is how I was cut apart from probably the others who had done their 5-year integrated courses from different NLUs in India. So I think this is more of a calculated risk. I really cannot answer this for anyone, but I would say definitely take a year to practice. Post-COVID, I'm not sure if this would be a very favorable scenario. I think they would be open to actually offering it to anyone and everyone who wants to study, because I think now with online classes, I'm not sure how much of the money he's going to pump in, because you wouldn't have travel and stay as such. So this is something which is actually something I cannot predict at this stage, and I think we'll have to wait for perhaps a few more sessions with your team before we actually resume normalcy and we actually have some sort of a way ahead with the vaccination. So I don't think I can comment on the kind and nature of funding that he'll now pump in. I don't know. I think we should wait. Abhishek.
Yep, I think that makes sense, but that's a very, very interesting and detailed answer. So thanks for that. I think that does bring me to the end of my Q&A too. So I would just like to thank you for taking this session and taking the time out to actually come for today's session. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the exhaustive list of questions. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Tarun, you could end